One, we hear a lot of bad news stories about the environment, and people tend to throw up their hands and say, it's hopeless, there's nothing I can do. And here was a group of 10 birders, basically, who said, we can make this mountain green again, and they did. Second, I think there's a lot of research that's going on there now, but it's not research by your professionals. There are faculty from colleges and universities involved. We have a lot of undergraduate students, but we have a lot of kids that are in middle school. We have a lot of teachers. We have a lot of just volunteers from the public who have all helped us with our research, and that's the only way that this has happened. So community partnerships, I think, is a really important message if you want to make a difference environmentally. One of the things that I'm really intrigued by is getting people outdoors. I think there's a lot of talk about the nature deficit disorder and things, and so one of the things that's been really fun is this is a project where people can get outdoors, which is good for their health. They have to hike up and down the mountain, but at the same time they're making important contributions to science. You don't have to be an expert is an important part. So we have kids that come out and they just observe something and they come and tell us about it, and it becomes a whole new project. So we've been really sponsoring kids to do research, and that's exciting to get them. Even if they don't become scientists, they are not anti-science. And I think the other important message that we've learned from the community, they're very fond of the zinc company because of the history and how well the company treated the people. So it doesn't do any good to blame the companies in the past, but to celebrate the role that company played in our industrial history, but learn from what we did wrong and move forward instead of saying, that company was evil or bad or something. So we celebrate the history of the industry as well as the environment, which is a little bit unusual, I think. I think it's not what it was when I was growing up. I grew up, so in the 70s when I was a middle school student, recycling was the new thing, looking at alternative energy sources for the first time because we had the first gas crisis. And everybody seemed to be, and Earth Day was new, centered around thinking about the environment, but they were local issues and what seemed to be small problems. What I think one of the big differences is the problems are so global. So climate change is something I do a lot with. Just seems either one, there's nothing we can do about it because it's so massive, or two, it's happening down the road. It's going to be 50 years or 100 years, so I don't understand how it's important to me now. And so there's a lot of, I don't know if it's skepticism, but just a sense that, well, it's not, my next paycheck, or it's not something I'm going to see a difference, 3 to 4 years. I wrote my first op-ed 2 years ago to counter somebody who had criticized the science behind climate change, and I got hate mail, which I had never had before. And that was an eye-opener. But I think I'm more of an optimist in thinking that, okay, well, if the traditional ways of interacting with the public as a scientist don't work, let's think about creative new ways. And so I have a project right now that we're getting people involved with phenology, which is looking at changes in the season and timing. And they're out monitoring. In fact, we have a big project for Earth Week right now. And they don't even realize that they're collecting the data because of climate change. They're just noticing because we're trying to see when spring is coming. And then we use that information to do blogs and totally different kinds of messaging than me giving science-based talks. And so I think we just have to be more creative in how we communicate. Well, I truly believe that the environment is what makes our life rich. I think if we don't get out in nature and appreciate kind of the awe, the wonder, then we're really missing a big part of things in our life. And I think that it helps your senses overall. So even if you're not the kind of person who camps or hikes or whatever, if you don't get out in nature and pay attention to what's going on around you, you don't pay attention to other things in your life as well. So that's one thing. And I think people do need to be informed. There's a lot of choices, so whether we're talking about alternative energy sources or the quality of our water, the amount of our water, people need to know what the issues are and what choices they have. I think that's really important to let them critically sort through things and not preach to them what the answer should be. Well, I hope that people believe that there's hope in terms of environment. We can let nature heal itself. Nature can teach us a lot. And I believe that working together with community partners and scientists and youth is really exhilarating for a community and allows us to do things that we couldn't do as individuals. Well, one thing, I've thought a lot about why I've ended up where I've ended up. And I grew up in Michigan. I grew up on the Great Lakes. And that influences me in ways that I never realized. I grew up in Lake Superior. And I think about it all the time. So water issues are really important to me, environmental issues. And so I think that experience that you have in nature as a child will affect who you are later on in life. And when I talk to my students, the ones who are very pro-nature or like to get outside, they all say the same thing. There was a camping event with their family or something they did outdoors that really triggered something in their own career path.
This Greening of the Great Lakes vodcast is produced by Michigan State University and News Talk 760 WJR for MLive.com.